Masechet Sukkah daf 39. We're going to complete our discussion about the recitation of Hallel and then begin the next Mishnah, which is what to do to acquire Lulav and Etzog during a Shivi'it year, which is actually very applicable to this coming year when Sukkot will in fact be Shivi'it. So the last part of the previous Mishnah was Makom Shenagul Lichpol. When you're reciting the Hallel, so the last few Pisukim are repeated. We mentioned the reason because in Mizmor 118, many of the Pisukim have an internal repetition, even if not exact word for word, almost. And you have lots of repetitions throughout until you get to Odecha. And so there are different customs about how much to repeat. And here we're going to see two of them. Tana Rabbi Kofel Badevarim. Rabbi Elazar ben Perata Mosif Badevarim. So Rabbi would repeat some Pesukim. Rabbi Elazar would add some words. Now, what does it mean? I mean, at first glance, it looks like he's adding some new words. So we're going to try to figure out, what does that mean? Mai Mosif, Amar Abaye, Mosif Tichpol, Me Odecha Ulemata. He repeats from Odecha and on. So it sounds like the first rabbi to be, he would repeat from Ana Hashem, Hoshi Ana, from here, Pasuk 25. And the second sage would repeat from even before that, starting from Odecha. Repeat a few more Pesukim. So there you go. There are two different customs there. David told me after the previous class that the Lebanese custom is to repeat from Baruch Haba. We say that all the way till the end, right straight through, and then go back to Baruch Haba and say those three Pesukim again, and then say Hodu twice. So yes, they're repeated, but not each one, but the three together repeated as a unit. And so that's yet another variation. So once again, everybody does whatever custom that they have. Rambam would prefer if everybody did the same thing, the original custom of the Mishnah, but that's not how history has panned out. So Livarech Yivarech, and if there's a custom to say a beracha, then you do, otherwise you don't. The variation of custom is only regarding the ending blessing. You say Yahalelucha. For that, there are different customs of what to do. But the opening beracha, that everyone agrees is a mitzvah to say a beracha. Because the rule is of Shemuel, all mitzvot, you should make a blessing on them. And the blessing should be before you do them. So since Hallel is a mitzvah, therefore, everyone agrees that one must say an opening beracha. Good. There's a beautiful a tradition that the rabbis have taught that before any mitzvah, you say a beracha, and that increases your concentration. You're not just doing a random act by rote, but you're saying this, I'm doing this because I'm commanded to do so, and you think about the significance. In order to accomplish that, obviously you have to say the beracha beforehand. Okay, now this word, oved, in what sense does it mean before? Oved means to pass, but maybe it's pass after. We want to explain the derivation of this word. So we're going to offer three of them. Damar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Tichtiv, Vayaros Achimas derech hakikar, vayavodet hakushi. When Achimatz wanted to give some news to King David about his son dying, there was a Kushi runner and who was already left before him. But Achimatz wanted to be the one to give the news, so Achimatz ran faster than the Kushi, and it says Vaya'avor. So Vaya'avor means he passed him and went in front of him. So he went before him, he's going to reach the destination first. So that's where you see that the word Vaya'avor means to do it first. So to here, Mevarech over le'asiyatan means you say the beracha before the action of taking the lulav. The second derivation from Bereshit, when Yaakov is confronting Esav, he has his family behind him, and he goes in front. So avad and lifnehem, pass in front. This is spatially, but we're learning that applies temporally also. The first pasuk is in a way better because it just says ve'abod, not lifnehem. The second pasuk says avad and also in front, which makes the avad itself more ambiguous. Pasuk from Micha, speaking about the end of days, where the Mashiach will come before them, and God will be in front. So you have Hashem, and then the Mashiach as king is going to lead the people. So here it says Vayavod and Lifnehem. So again, we learn that Vayavod means to be in front. Okay, so that's the end of the discussion. I mean, I think interestingly today, as far as I know, everybody says the beracha at the end. I guess everybody says the beracha at the beginning also when we say full Hallel, but there is the discrepancy of different customs. When you say half Hallel, Ashkenazim and Spanish Portuguese do say a beracha, other Adot Mizrach do not say a beracha. So a little bit ironic that there is a discrepancy of custom before, but not at the end. But apparently back then, whenever they said full Hallel, they said opening beracha, but not necessarily a closing beracha. Okay, next Mishnah is very interesting. Halokech lulav mechabero b'shiv'it, noten lo etrog b'matana. Lefi she'en rashai lelokcho b'shiv'it. Someone who buys a lulav from his friend during the Shemitah year, he can buy the lulav, but the etrog has to be given as a present, because one is not permitted to buy produce of Shevi'it. So let's do a quick intro to the laws of Shevi'it. Obviously, you cannot plant or plow anything during the Shevi'it year. However, many things grow on their own. Trees are going to blossom and grow on their own, and even many vegetables will grow on their own. So what's the law of things that you didn't plant, but they grow on their own? It's open to anyone. Even if you own the field, you don't have any special rights to it. Anyone can come and take what they want. However, they cannot hoard it. You can take enough for what you need now or the next few days, but you can't take so much that when if it runs out in the field, that you can't hoard and store it when there's nothing left in the field. So you can take it to use and eat a little bit, but not a lot to store. Also, you're not allowed to sell produce of Shevi'it. You can't open a fruit store and sell the things of Shevi'it. That is not permitted. However, a little bit, you just want to sell to your friend, to your neighbor, that is permitted. However, that money becomes Kodesh and has Kiddushat Shevi'it. And so the money that you make from selling, a few apples to your friend, you have to use that to buy food during the Shevi'it year and consume it. You can't save that money for afterwards. So in other words, the coins are going to have basically the same law as the produce. Good. So we're talking about a case where, someone went and gathered a few lulavim and etrogim, hopefully not to open a store, otherwise that would be really prohibited, but just a few. So he's my neighbor. I don't want to go out and bother, even though it's free. I'd rather just pay him for it. So what's the law? So we're assuming now Chavero here is assuming this guy is an Amaretz. He's not particularly learned, even though the word Chaver can also mean someone who you can totally trust with all the laws, agricultural laws. But here it doesn't mean that. It means someone, I don't know if they're going to be so careful with the money that they use to buy. So therefore, if I buy the lulav, buying the lulav is permitted. We're going to see why the lulav is permitted. One hypothesis is that maybe only in etrog, fruit that grows during the Shevi'it year is a problem. But this is just some branches that grow, right? So maybe branches I'm allowed to take and sell. But we'll see further discussion of that. So right now, yes, I'm allowed to buy the lulav, and pay for it, but the etrog I am not allowed to pay for, and therefore I have to convince him to give it to me as a present, because one is not permitted to buy during Shevi'it. Seems like a blanket statement that you just can't buy anything. All right, so that's the Mishnah. Let's analyze the details. What if this Amaretz it does not want to give it as a present? He went and he gathered a few of them, and he doesn't want to give it away as a present. He wants to make some money off of it. Then what do I do? So simple. Let's say the whole set he was going to sell you for $50. So then you tell him, listen, I'll buy just the lulav and hadas and arava for $50, and give me the etrog for free. So as long as I have in mind that I'm giving him the money only for the lulav and not for the etrog, then the guy said, okay, what's the difference to him? He's still getting his money. And so that way he sells the lulav and gives you the etrog as a present. And then in that case, that money will not be, we don't worry that the money will be used for negative purpose, as we'll see. So the question is, why do you have to do that? Why can't you just actually buy and pay him for the etrog? What would be the problem with it? I mean, you're allowed to buy and sell a few things. Because we're not going to give money that will have the kiddusha of Shavi'it to an Ama'aretz, because he's not going to be careful to go and buy food with it and consume it that year. He might put it away and store it until the next year, and therefore we cannot trust him with the money. The Tanya, we have a Braita. And Mosrin deme perot shevi'it amaris yoter mimizon shelosh seudot. So we're qualifying. Actually, you can give him a little bit of money, enough for 3 meals. Why? That's like a day's worth of food. So if I buy something from him and give him, I don't know how much is $100 for a day's worth of meals. So if you give him that much, then he's probably going to spend it right there and then on that day. If I give him more than that, then he's going to put it away in his drawer, and maybe he's going to leave it there, forget about it till next year. So I can give him a little money, spending money that he'll use right away, but not more. V'masad, and what if there is some kind of deal, and I want to give him more because I want to buy something that's more expensive? Here's a solution. Yomar harei ma'ot halalu yihu mechulalim al perot sheyesh li betoch beti. So then, since I don't trust him, I'll say, here, I'm giving you this $200 to buy this item, but the kiddusha of a Shavi'it that is in that money, I am going to transfer to $200 that I have in my house. And that way, his money becomes desacralized, and the money on my house, I'm careful, so I'll make sure to use that money to buy food and consume it during the Shavuot year. So there is a way around it, but it's not so easy to do, and so therefore the Mishnah says the best thing is to get the etrog as a present, because we don't want to give him money that he's not going to be careful with. And then when I go home, I'll take that money and use it. Okay, good. So now we understand the Mishnah and why it's best to get the etrog as a present. We quoted this Baraita, but the Baraita continues, so we're going to talk about the continuation. This question?
Rabbi, how does this work if the Kiddusha is, I'm buying from the Amaretz, so doesn't it get Kiddushat Shavi'it when I give him the money? Isn't it his money that has the Kiddusha?
Yes,
not
when
mine.
I give him the money, then it's Kiddusha, but I can transfer the Kiddusha because money is fungible. So I can transfer it into different money.
But it's his money, not my money.
It's his money. He keeps the money, but the Kiddusha transfers to another money.
But I'm allowed to do that with his?
Yeah, but I mean, it's for his benefit, because now his money is untied.
Okay.
Right. So it would be Zachin Adam. I mean, maybe he would agree too, but yeah, I mean, it's for his benefit, so it would be permitted. Good. Now the Barata continues. All that applies only when the Ama'aretz went and gathered some lulavim and etrogim from land that did not belong to anybody. Right? Whoever owned it said, "Hefker, anyone can come and take it." If you have a landowner who doesn't care about the laws of Shavuot, he's not following them, and he puts guards and fences around his field and doesn't let anybody take them in violation of the Torah law, and then someone who gets some of that produce is not permitted to sell it at all, not even a small amount of money, a half of an isar, because it came to him in a prohibited way, and we don't want to reward bad behavior. So you kind of have to check and see, where did you get this from? If you got it from Hifked, then it's okay. Otherwise, not. So this whole Mishnah and everything we've been talking about is only if it comes from a field that the owner said anyone can come and take it, as they should. All right, so that's the second part of the Braita. Regarding that, we have a contradiction. Mativ Rav Sheshat. Umina mufkar shalosh seudot vetu la. I'm sorry, there's a contradiction to the first half of the baraita about the hefked. Is that true? That if it's a hefked piece of land, then you are permitted to buy up to 3 seudot and no more? We have a following baraita where we're going to learn that if it's a land that's not owned by anyone, hefked land, then there's no limit in the following source. Is a Mishnah. Urminhu. Urminhi, hapegam vehayarbuzin, vehashitim, vehalaglogot, vehakusbar shebeharim, vakarpash shebaneharot, vagargir shel afar, peturin min hamaaser. So we have a whole series of different vegetables and herbs, rue and sorrel, asparagus, purslane, coriander in the mountains, water parsley of the rivers, garin, iruka. These are all exempt from maaser. These are all things that grow in the wild. People don't harvest them and watch them generally because they're very cheap. So therefore, this is a side point. You don't have to bring maaser. Maaser that I give to the Levi, for example, I only have to give maaser to the Levi of that which I own because I own it and the Levi has no access to land. Therefore, I have to give him maaser. But if it's hefked, then and anyone can go. The Levi can go and help himself to these items that grow in the mountains or next to the rivers. So if I go and take some of it, I don't have to give maaser. Furthermore, during the Shivi'it year, they grow on their own in the wild. If someone goes and plucks a lot of it, they can be sold, and you can buy from anyone. Because nobody safeguards it. So these are all things that are not safeguarded. They're hefked, and you see in the Mishnah, there's no limit. Even if I want to buy $1,000 worth of asparagus, it seems like it's permitted, and this contradicts the braita that we just saw, because the braita said that if it's hefked, then you can only buy up to 3 meals, because we want to make sure that the Amaretz takes that money and uses it and doesn't put it away. So that's the question. Hu motiv la vehu mefarek la. Rav Sheshet asked the question, but he's so brilliant, he also had the answer. Right? That's always good when the student asks you a question and has the answer too ready. Bichdei man shanu. When we recited that Mishnah, we also said that there's an explanation that it only applies to man. Man means an amount sufficient for sustenance. Bichdei man, enough for sustenance. This word man probably relates to the word man that fell in the desert, right? A certain amount of food that you would need. So this Mishnah is not unlimited, even though it doesn't say so in the Mishnah. The Mishnah also has a kind of oral law. When the Mishnah was set as a set text, it didn't include every detail. There was the teachers, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, would say, listen, this Mishnah applies in this case and so on. So this we said anyway, that the Mishnah only applies to that you can buy enough for sustenance for a day. Seems like they even remembered this particular phrase as an explanation of the Mishnah, only enough for sustenance for a day. Now, my mashma dahay man lishana de mezonehu. Gemara wonders, what is the strange uses of a word man as meaning sustenance for a day? Tichtiv ayman lahem hamelech. In Daniel, when the king gets Daniel and his friends and says, I want you to be my advisors. So it says that he appointed daily portion from the king's food. And Daniel asked for the vegetarian meal because he wanted to keep kosher. So there it says the word baiman, meaning appointed, but it is talking about food. So therefore, that's one place where we see the word man means food. The Gemara does not say connected to man that fell in the desert, but some of the commentaries do make that connection. Okay, good. So far, we explained the etrog. How come on the Shavit year, this guy went out and he gathered a few etrogim? He can't open up a store, but he can sell a few to his friends. So I'm allowed to buy. I'm allowed to buy the lulav, but I should get the etrog as a present because when I give him the money, I don't know what he's going to do with it, and therefore I should make sure to get it as a present. All right, so that all made sense for the etrog. But now our question is, what about the lulav? Lulav also is something that grew during the Shin, was harvested during the Shivit year, and I'm using it. So isn't that also susceptible to the problem of Shivit? How come I'm allowed to buy the Lulav and I don't worry about that money? That's the question. Lulav nameh. Lulav bar shishita nichnasa shevilitu. Let's get our timeline straight. Let's assume we're talking about now. We're in the beginning of Elul, right? So if Sukkot is going to be in a month and change. So whatever I'm using on Sukkot, Lulav etrog, they're already growing from now. So I'm going to pick them and harvest them probably in Tishrei. The laws of Shivit start on Rosh Hashanah, on Aleph Tishrei. So it's picked after Tishrei to use. But it doesn't grow in one day. It's already almost grown from now, from Elul. So now our question and the whole rest of the stuff is going to be, what's the key moment that when this fruit becomes a fruit and eligible for the laws of Shivit? Is it from the time that it's plucked, harvested, and that would be after Tishrei during the harvest year, or is that at the time when it started growing, and that would be in Elul before the Shivit year? So that's what we're going to see. That when is the cutoff time? So the answer is Lulav belongs to the 6th year, and that goes into the 7th. Since it grew most of its growth during the 6th year, and even though I plucked it off the tree during the 7th year, it belongs to the 6th year and therefore is permitted. Anyone can come and use it and sell it and store it, and doesn't have the laws of Shivit. That's why I can pay for the Lulav and not the etrog. Okay, that's a good answer. But etrog nameh bar shishita nichneset l'Shiviti. I'll say the same thing for etrog. Right now, it's Elul is growing, and so it's almost ready. Just because I plucked it after Tishrei shouldn't matter, since it came from the 6th year. It's a 6th year fruit. So we answer etrog batalikita azlinan. No, the etrog has a different fruit, has a different law. That for etrog we go by the time of its picking, but whereas for the other leaves, that goes by the time that it was grown. So they different laws apply to them, and that's why it all makes sense. This will be helpful because in the 8th year, you're going to have the opposite problem, right? If a lulav is considered the previous year's fruit, then it's going to be the 7th year. You won't be allowed to buy that. But the etrog will be considered the 8th year, so you will be. So maybe you could do a switch. And in the next year after that, you can buy the etrog and get the lulav for free. But because we have 2 different cutoff points for these species, that way we can make this arrangement. Mark, you have a question?
Actually, it's me.
Okay.
So if that's the case, then you would imagine that the owner of the etrog trees, right, knowing that it's a Shivit coming up, he would pick them before the Shivit.
Mm-hmm.
Can't you argue that?
Yes, that would be a good idea for him to do. It's possible that they're not ready yet. Maybe they're just, not. I mean, we saw machloket about it being ripe or not. So for whatever reason, maybe they're not ready. But yes, that would be a good solution. Okay, good. So veha ben Rabban Gamliel ben Rabbi Eliezer linan shvi'it etrog batar hanata azlinan. Now we have a challenge to this, right? We're assuming that the author of the Mishnah thinks that for etrog, we go by the time of its picking. Well, the problem is that we have the following 2 great sages, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer, who say that an etrog goes by the time of its ripening, of its growing. So that's what we're going to see in the following source. The source is a little bit long, but that's the point we're getting at, that both of these rabbis disagree. So, who is our Mishnah going to go like in that case? So they say, they both say that during the Shivit year, the etrog follows the time of ripening, which would be before. This is the words of Rabban Gamliel first. Etrog is similar to a tree in 3 ways and to a vegetable in 1 way. That if when we're deciding when is the cutoff line, it's going to be like a tree, which follows the time of ripening. And that will apply to orla. When you plant a tree, whenever you plant it, the first 3 years, you can't use it at all. And then Revai is the 4th year, you have to eat it in Jerusalem, and for the laws of Shivit. So you see that, according to the Rabban Gamliel, etrog follows the same as other fruits. It is the same as vegetables in one way. That for maaser, that you follow like a vegetable, and that would be the time of picking. But that only applies to maaser. If you want to know, do I give maaser sheni or maaser ani? Is it like the second year or the third year? So that you would follow the time of picking. But that's not relevant to us. What's relevant to us is that the Shevi'it follows the time of ripening, according to him. So etrog is a little bit different. It is a tree, but it has some aspects that's like a vegetable because it needs so much water and it's irrigated. Okay, that's Rabban Gamliel. Rabbi Eliezer goes even further and says etrog is like a tree for all matters, and therefore you see they both agree that regarding Shevi'it, etrog is like a tree, and therefore it follows the time of its ripening. Since it follows the time of its ripening, that's the 6th year, and therefore I should be allowed to buy the lulav, just like I can buy the etrog, just like I can buy the lulav. And therefore, our Mishnah that says you can buy the lulav but not the etrog, it doesn't follow either of these two sages. So who does it follow? That's our question, and we have an answer. Hu damar ki haytana. Our Mishnah can follow the following Tanya in this Baraita. The Tanya. Amar Rabbi Yosef Abtolmos, nice Greek name. He'aid mishum hamisha zekenim. He testified. He's a great sage, and he testified in the name of 5 elders. Etrog achar likita lemaaser. Etrog, we follow the time of picking when it comes to maaser. Okay, that doesn't relate to us because that's just maaser. But then after that, v'rabotenu nimnu be'usha ve'ameru ben maaser ben shevi'it. The rabbis got together in the city of Usha when the Sanhedrin had many stops, right? When they went from Yerushalayim to Yavne, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Jews were not allowed in the south at all, so they went up north, and so the Sanhedrin gathered together in Usha, and the rabbis got together, and one of the things that they voted on is this topic, and they said, whether both for Maaser and for Shevi'it, the etrog follows the time of picking, and therefore this is the source of the opinion of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah that says that etrog you have to get as a present, and you can't buy because it does have kedushat Shevi'it, and that's because it's picked during the Shemitah year. So and that's the conclusion of the vote. So we have good press. The Mishnah has a good source, good present. You're right. It's not like Rabban Gamliel, but it follows the vote at Usha. Okay, good. Now, just a side point, a question about this little baraita. Shevi'it, man dachar shemeh. Whoever brought up Shevi'it, you started off the story talking about Abtolmos, who said that etrog, you follow Likita for Maaser. And all of a sudden, they get together and they vote, and not only about Maaser, but also Shevi'it. Who asked them to vote about Shevi'it when the whole discussion so far was about Maaser? So we need a clarification. The answer is we're missing words, and this is what it means to say that the tradition that Abtolmos had from the 5 sages was that etrog follows the kita for maaser, but it follows the ripening for Shevi'it, like Rabban Gamliel. But then, when the rabbis got together in Usha, they disagreed with that, and they said that etrog batal likita ben the maaser ben the Shevi'it. So you have to just add in that qualification, and with that we can understand our Mishnah follows the bottom line of those sages, and that will be the explanation of why you have to do this arrangement. Yes, you go buy the lulav, but then you have to make sure to get the etrog as a gift, so that he will not mishandle the money. We'll stop here, but tomorrow we're going to talk about the lulav itself. Why is it subject to the laws of Shevi'it if it's just a tree? It's not something edible. It's not a fruit. So maybe that's why the lulav is, and nothing to do with the cutoff time of ripening or the time of picking. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen, amen.